Section 2.1, Zeros and Factors. A zero is the point or points where the graph of the function crosses the x-axis. These points are also known as the x-intercepts, roots, or solutions of a function. Identify the zeros of the functions below. So one of the key points here is that a zero is also called an x-intercept. So the x-intercepts, recall that is the points where the graph crosses the x-axis. So in this case, at x equals 5, we would have a 0. And notice here, if I was to, this point here is 5, 0. If I put 0 for y and solve for x, then you would see that x is equal to 5. So for number 2, if we find the zeros, this is where the graph crosses the x-axis. And so 1, 0 here is going to be x equals 3 for this one. And this 0 would be x equals negative 2. Again, recall that the x-intercept means that y is always equal to 0. So in this case, if I set y equal to 0 and I solve for each of these factors, you will see that we get our zeros, x equals 3 and x equals negative 2. So when we input the zeros of a function into the function, it will always give us an output of 0. And that's what happened here. Okay, so if we input the 5, 5 minus 5 is always going to give us 0. So if we look at the next picture below, here we have an equation. This is the equation. And our zeros here are x equals 3 and x equals negative 1. And so all this is saying is if we let our 0, 3, if we enter it for each of the x's here, we would end up with 3 squared is 9, 2 times 3 is 6, minus 3 is equal to 0. 9 minus 6 minus 3 is going to give us 0. And so by inputting our 0 of 3, it's always going to give us an output of 0. So if we want to evaluate the function above at x equals negative 1, so here I would have f of x is equal to x squared minus 2x minus 3. So if I enter negative 1 for x, let's see if we get a 0. Negative 1 is 1. Negative 1 squared is 1. Negative 2 times negative 1 is positive 2. And so this gives us 0. So f of negative 1 is equal to 0. And so what this means is by us getting a 0 here, that is going to tell us that x equals negative 1 is a 0. Evaluate the function g of x equals negative x minus 13 at the given points and determine if the value is a 0 of the function. So here we can evaluate the function by substituting anywhere we see an x, a number 2. And so in this case, I get negative 2 minus 13. So g of 2 is equal to negative 15. Since we did not get a 0 when we evaluate it, then we say that x equals 2 is not a 0. Let's try g of 13. So if I substitute 13, I get negative 13 minus 13. That's going to give me a negative 26. So x equals 13 is not a 0. G of negative 13, substitute negative 13 for x. Negative negative is positive, and 13 minus 13 is 0. So in this case, since we get 0, that tells us that x equals negative 13 is a 0. Example 4, we want to do the same thing. Let h of x equals x squared minus 4. So here we're going to rewrite the problem. So if I enter 2 for x, I get 2 squared minus 4. 2 squared is 4 minus 4. So that's going to give me 0. So the next example we have, so h of 2 is equal to 0. So that tells me that x equals 2 is a 0. Okay, so example B, if we have h of x is equal to x squared minus 4, and if I substitute 0 for x, then we get h of 0 is equal to negative 4. So that tells me that x of 0 is not a 0. So again, the value inside of the parentheses, this represents your x value. So let's try the next one. So h of negative 2 is equal to negative 2 squared minus 4. Negative 2 squared is 4 minus 4. And so we get 0. So that tells me that x equals negative 2 is a 0. Okay, so in the previous example, we saw the function could be written as this. And so here, the x minus 3 and the x minus 2 are called factors. So in future lessons, you'll use these factors to find the zeros. Okay, so for now, let's just multiply them. So here I would get x times x is x squared. X times negative 2 is negative 2x. 3 times x is positive 3x. And 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. Combine your like terms. Negative 2x plus 3x is 1x minus 6. Let's look at example 6. So here we get x times x is x squared. X times 5 is positive 5x. Negative 5 times x is negative 5x. Negative 5 times 5 is negative 25. Combine like terms. If 5x minus 5x is 0, and so we're just left with negative 25. Example 7. So here you can multiply the 3 in the parentheses first, and then that times this. Or you can also multiply x times x is x squared. X times 3 is 3x. 1 times x is x. And 1 times 3 is 3. Combine your like terms, so we get x squared. 3x plus x is 4x. And 3x squared, 3 times x squared is 3x squared. Plus 3 times 4 is 12x. Plus 9.